I found out that my husband is cheating on me. And the person he's cheating with is my neighbor. So tonight, I plan to kill my husband with my own hands. I have a perfect alibi planned. I informed my colleagues at work that there will be a half-hour video conference at 6:30 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., I entered the online meeting room, adjusted the position of the camera, and clicked to turn it on. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for working hard tonight. Colleagues who are not speaking, please turn off your microphones so as not to disturb the speaker after I finish my opening remarks. And turn off the microphone. And that's it for me. I just need to keep the camera on and smile occasionally so I can provide an alibi. At this moment, my husband is sitting directly opposite me. At 6:40, I hand him the juice I prepared, which contains a large amount of sleeping pills. Specially for you. It's good for digestion. Without moving, I remain seated in the camera's view, facing the camera. He smiles and takes it. I lean back in my chair. I watch him behind the camera, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down as he gulped down the juice. At 6:55, the meeting was almost over. I waved him over. Come say hi to my colleagues. He's always been very cooperative in front of outsiders. We're the perfect couple. He did as I said and showed his face on camera. And all our meeting content will be preserved in a complete video. Then, I turned on the microphone. He enthusiastically greeted his colleagues. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, he said he was feeling a bit sleepy and was going to go to bed. Everyone in the meeting heard. I pretended to look puzzled. Why are you going to bed so early today? I had a lot to do today. And I'm a bit tired. Go. Our conversation was recorded by the camera. At the same time, this video can prove that he was still alive at around 7 o'clock. Well, everyone, it's been a long day. We'll see you on Monday. I looked up at the time. 7:02. After logging out of the meeting, I quickly cleaned up the cup containing a large number of sleeping pills. Then, I went into the room and saw that he was already asleep in bed. So I put the suicide note I had prepared in the bedside drawer. At the same time, I turned off his phone. Tonight at 7:30, I have a college alumni reunion. And it's exactly half an hour from my house to the reunion venue. I have to perfectly connect the two times to prove that before I left the house, my husband was still alive. So I didn't have much time. I quickly changed into a neat outfit and grabbed the bag I had prepared long ago and left the house at exactly 7:05. Now, I'm going to kill my neighbor across the street. The reason is simple. My husband cheated on me with my neighbor. So I plan to get rid of them both tonight and send the pair of them to hell together. As soon as I left the house, ding, I received a message from Mary, my college classmate and best friend since childhood. I've already arrived. Why can't I see you? Where are you? Are you okay? Do you need me to come pick you up? She always makes a big deal out of nothing. Her fingers flew across the screen. There'd been a sudden meeting at the office. I'd just left the house. And my feet hadn't stood still. The moment the message was sent, my feet had already walked straight across the street. I put away my phone and put on a mask and the gloves I'd prepared so as not to leave behind any fingerprints. Then, I quickly entered the code for the house across the street. And, welcome home. The door opened smoothly. Jenny had told me the code herself. We'd been neighbors for over a year and got along well. As far as I can remember, she always dressed very well and liked to tie a beautiful silk scarf around the cuff of her sleeve. Later, we exchanged contact information, and I remember her screen name was Musi. But as far as I know, her name is Jenny. Her husband is Jeffrey. But out of courtesy, I didn't ask any more. Every time I went to her house as a guest, she would treat me to all kinds of coffee. As we talked, we learned that her real job was as a writer, and that she planned to open a cafe in the future. She would invite me for coffee. We could have become good friends. Until 3 months ago, my husband came home late every night and said he had to work overtime on a recent project. At first I believed him. But then I met his colleagues. From what they said, I realized that they never worked overtime. I didn't immediately expose his lie. Instead, I paid attention to changes in his behavior. I noticed that every time he came home, he smelled faintly of perfume. Since then, I suspected that he was cheating on me. But I hesitated to found any evidence. Until last weekend. When our two families went out again, I took advantage of my husband's inattention to get his phone. WeChat list could not find anything. I changed my strategy this time. Opened his friends list. Sure enough, in close friends list found a name I've never seen before. The avatar is a landscape photo. I silently noted the name. Switched to a small account. Entered the person's page. Fortunately, had posted a work. The text is, "Love is the meeting of soul and soul." The content of the video. It looked like it was filmed on the balcony of a house. And the scenery looked so familiar. As if it was filmed on the balcony of my house. Could it be that I'm overthinking it? This is just his personal account. Until I saw the last second of the video. I saw a pot of clivia in the corner of the balcony. That clivia was a gift from me to Jenny, the neighbor across the street. Thinking about it, no wonder the scenery in the video looked like my house. This video was filmed in Jenny's house. And Jenny recently published a new novel, which happened to be about the love story between the male protagonist and the female neighbor. At this moment, all the evidence points to the two of them. The words that came to mind. Love is the meeting of soul and soul. This is for two people who have cheated. It's really ironic. At this moment, my gaze is fixed on the direction of the two of them. The two of them are chatting and laughing together at a barbecue. And Jenny is wiping the sweat from my husband's forehead with her silk scarf-tied hand. Unexpectedly, under my very nose. The two of them are already behaving in a very natural and intimate manner. I intend to confirm my suspicions. I opened my phone and followed her on Twitter. Then, through the chat box, I sent a smiley face. The next second, my heart was completely shattered by the ringing of my phone. The ringtone was coming from Jenny's phone in her pocket. I calmed down instantly and walked over to her, forcing a smile. Smiling, I said, "Any news?" She was taken aback at first, but then took out her phone in front of me. I don't know. Never mind. I forced out of my throat. Well, at that moment, I was completely convinced of their relationship. An hour ago, at 6 o'clock tonight, I had already visited the opposite door, under the pretext of delivering freshly baked egg tarts. Ding dong. A few seconds later, Jenny opened the door for me to deliver some freshly baked egg tarts. "Come in." She turned around defenselessly. "Don't you have a class reunion? Why haven't you gone yet?" I closed the door and took off my shoes. Calmly said, "After killing you, I'll go." Before she could react, I raised my hand, and she fell unconscious. I took hold of her arms and laid her on the bed. I had overestimated my strength. Jenny was thin, but an adult woman was still too heavy for me. After I had laboriously arranged her, I tied her limbs to the 4 bed legs with the prepared rope, so that she was in a big X on the bed. Then I returned home, and did not return to Jenny's house until 7:05 p.m. And this was the actual time of her death. I quickly entered the house. She remained in the same position as an hour ago. My eyes fell on the pillow next to her. Then, I picked it up without hesitation and pressed it hard against her face. A few seconds later, she woke up. Her body began to struggle violently. Fortunately, I had secured her limbs earlier to prevent her from scratching my skin tissue during her struggle. I did my best to hold her head down. I don't know how long it took before she stopped struggling. I was afraid that she was only unconscious, so I kept the action and pressed her for a while longer. Picked up the pillow after making sure she was dead and put it back in place and cut off a lock of her hair. I did all these trivial things because I was imitating the murderer. Recently, there has been a series of murders in the city. The murderer targets women. At home. After tying up their hands and feet. To suffocate to death. End the lives of the victims. After the murder. The murderer will also take a lock of the victim's hair. And through multiple murders. The police have successfully identified the murderer as a male. Therefore, I had to blame Jenny's death on the serial killer. I cleaned up the evidence. And tidied up. Then I changed into the clothes I'd prepared. And left Jenny's house. I took off my gloves. And went out the front door. It was 7:10 p.m. Me went to the underground car park. And made sure I was in the CCTV shot. I gunned the engine all the way. And arrived at the reunion. At 7:35 p.m. Linda. You're finally here. Mary was waiting for me at the door. Will the meeting go well? I smiled. Very smoothly. Once I entered. The reunion had already begun. But since it was a reunion for college alumni, there were many people we didn't know. No one would have cared what time I arrived. But there was one other person I needed to keep an eye on. Jenny's husband. Jeffrey. He and I were alumni. The only reason Jenny knew about the reunion was because her husband, Jeffrey, and I went to the same university. And I knew that Jeffrey got off work at 6:30 every night. The reunion was half an hour away from home. So I was sure he would never go home between leaving work and the reunion. But there were so many people at the reunion that I didn't see him. And I had killed 2 people in just 1 hour. It exhausted me both physically and mentally. I found a corner and sat down. Halfway through, I took the opportunity to go to the bathroom. To get rid of Jenny's hair that I had brought with me. At 10 p.m. a familiar smell hit me. I'm going back. Together. I'll take you there. It was Jeffrey. He was standing right in front of me. I don't know if it's because of the guilt of killing his wife. Or because he's guilty. I avoid eye contact. And look for Mary's figure. No, I am with my friend. Okay. I'll go first then. See you. I let out a sigh of relief. As I watch him walk out of the restaurant. What are you looking at? A few of us from my class are going to get together later. Let's go together. Mary's voice drags my thoughts back. I originally planned to go home and go to bed. After the reunion. And discover Ronald, my husband, dead the next morning. But now that I think about it, sleeping with a dead person is also a pretty scary thing. Plus, Jeffrey is already on his way home. So we'll soon discover Jenny at home. If I go back now, then there will be a normal police visit. And questioning and all that. In that case, the police will discover Ronald's death. And if it is determined to be an accident, then I will be highly suspicious. Therefore, right now, I plan to change my plan. And go to the next one with Mary. And let them be my time witnesses. During this night, my thoughts were with Ronald and Jenny. I checked the time. To see if Jeffrey had discovered Jenny's death. And called the police. Or if he had gone straight to the second bedroom. As Jenny had mentioned before. If Jeffrey came back too late, he would go straight to the second bedroom to rest. So Jeffrey might not have discovered it yet. But at the latest, he would discover it tomorrow morning. I spent the night in a state of confusion. Until 5 a.m. I parted with Mary. When we arrived at the building at 5:30 a.m., the neighborhood was quiet in the morning. And I didn't see any police officers. I parked the car. And went upstairs. I paid special attention to the door across the hall. It was quiet. Just like usual. I opened the door with doubts in my heart. I entered. Took off my shoes. And put down my bag. I walked into the bedroom and changed my clothes. As soon as I entered the room, I felt something strange about the house. After all, there was a fresh corpse in the house. Thinking about this, I suddenly felt a little thirsty. Just as I was about to walk out of the room. Suddenly, my back felt cold. In the corner of my eye, I saw Ronald, who should be lying on the bed, is gone. My hair stands on end. My scalp feels numb. Could it be that the dosage was insufficient? And he wasn't killed? Or maybe he pretended to drink it in front of me, when he didn't drink it at all. Countless possibilities flashed through my mind. And I knew I had to find him now. If he wakes up and finds me, he'll be ready with a fake suicide note. Or he'll realize that I'm the one who drugged him. He could kill me at any time. I quickly looked the bedroom over. Under the bed. Behind the bed curtain. In the closet. Under the table. Everywhere in the bedroom where someone could hide. I looked. Could it be that I was dreaming? I clearly saw him lying in bed before I left. Suddenly I thought of a possibility. Could it be that he woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom? I locked onto the bathroom. And without hesitation rushed to the bathroom. And pushed open the door. In an instant. I let out a sigh of relief. And my heart settled down. Ronald was lying in the bathtub filled with overflowing water. Or should I say? Hugh was correct. Could it be that he woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom? And accidentally turned on the bathtub. And then fell into a deep coma. And drowned. This reason seems reasonable. But who turned off the bathtub? So should I go ahead with the original plan? I just need to say that I came back and found the scene like this. And called the police. When the police found the suicide note I left on the bedside table, I can be cleared of suspicion. I quickly pulled out my phone. And called. When the police arrived, I told them the whole story of how I came home. Looking completely innocent. Madam, we need you to come to the police station for questioning. Okay. After a brief interrogation, I was still stuck at the police station. Because they didn't rule out homicide. And needed to search and test the house. But I knew no matter how the police investigated, they couldn't pin it on me. After all, the sleeping pills were meant for his own treatment. I said I had no idea. He hadn't taken any. But had saved a lot. This story was completely plausible. Nowadays, he drowned in the bathtub. And his death has nothing to do with me. I just need to wait for a simple interrogation. And leave. But at this moment, the police informed me that they found Jenny's hair in my house. In an instant, I panicked. But I instantly covered up my guilty look. And then asked in a puzzled voice. Jenny's hair. In my house? Yes. Officer Chen's sharp gaze was thrown at me. Maybe she dropped it when she visited my house. I calmly lied. While Officer Chen in front of me gave a helpless smile. You mean? Jenny lost a large amount of hair. When she was a guest in your home. Then he held up a photo of a large amount of hair. The background of the photo was my home. My heart instantly jumped into my throat. As if it wanted to break through my throat. And escape from my body. It jumped very hard. My hands were clasped together quietly in my lap. And I couldn't help but sweat profusely behind my back. I pressed my trembling throat and asked. Where is it? I don't know. I've never seen it before. The study. The study. This is simply impossible. I clearly disposed of it before I came home. How could it reappear in my home? Could it be that I've remembered it incorrectly? I could never have remembered it incorrectly. Could it be that the hair has grown legs all by itself? At that moment, Officer Chen continued to speak. We also found other people's hair. In the cabinet of your study. Surprise appeared on my face. I thought I heard wrong. Could it be that his affair partner is not? Based on hair color and texture. A preliminary judgment. These hairs may come from the recent Jiangqing serial murder case. Several victims. Of course. It takes some time to do the test. Once we have the results, we will notify you first. Officer Chen. What do you mean? My husband is the serial killer. I breathed uncontrollably anxiously. Surprised and excitedly asked. At present, this possibility cannot be ruled out. I wanted to blame Jenny's death on the serial killer everyone fears. But the killer has been sleeping next to me every night. Since there were no signs of forced entry. A large amount of sleeping pills were found in my husband's system. Also, drowning submerged in water leaves the time of death ambiguous. Coupled with the preservation of my meeting video. And yesterday's perfect time track. The police have not listed me as a suspect. However, after searching, the police did not mention any words from the suicide note to me. So he was not considered a suicide. At that moment, I received a new message. Miss, your neighbor Jenny died at home last night. According to the preliminary determination of the forensic doctor, she died at the hands of the recent serial killer in Jiangqing. And, according to the test, it has been confirmed that the hair found in your home is from the victim of the serial killing. I showed a very shocked expression. You mean Jenny was killed by my husband? I asked in disbelief and shock. Yes. That's great. I was so excited I could have screamed. I clenched my fists and tried to calm myself. Not only had I managed to kill 2 people, but I had also been cleared of suspicion. It was perfect. I owed this result to my serial killer husband. According to the current investigation, Jenny's death was consistent with the previous victims. In the serial murder case, they had all died of suffocation. And your husband liked to collect women's hair. In addition, all of them had been marked with an inscription on their bodies. Almost at the same time, I asked in surprise. Engraved. The next moment, I knew I was being reckless. But I didn't engrave anything. It just came out instinctively. Technically speaking, I didn't know that this was a detail of the serial killer's modus operandi. Officer Chen was obviously taken aback by my interruption. He looked at me and said emotionlessly, "Yes. The murderer has been caught. So I can disclose the details of the crime to you. Subsequent news reports will also cover the entire course of the case. If you are interested, you can pay attention to." I nodded indifferently. So can I go home? Yes. Because my best friend Mary needed to be my time witness. So she was also at the police station. After the investigation was over, she was afraid that I would be too sad. So she returned to my house with me. Looking at the empty house, I felt great. I relaxed and lay on the sofa. "Yeah, don't be too sad," said. She sat down next to me. "I heard that the police now suspect that Ronald committed suicide to avoid being charged." "Maybe," I answered indifferently. I hadn't slept all night and had cooperated with the police all day. I had no energy left to think. So he didn't leave a suicide note or anything to prove it was suicide. A suicide note. Yes. The police didn't find the fake suicide note I'd left deliberately on the bedside table, where it was most obvious. I sat up and said thoughtfully, "The police said there wasn't one." With that, I got up and walked towards the bedroom. "I'll go change my clothes." I walked into the bedroom and went straight to the bedside table. I pulled open the drawer where I'd left it. There really was nothing there. How could that be? Did Ronald really get killed by someone else? At that moment, I heard Mary's voice behind me. "You're looking for this." Turning around, I saw that the fake suicide note was in her hands. I widened my eyes. Did Mary know that I killed Ronald? I instantly calmed down and pretended to be puzzled, asking, "What is this?" "Ronald's suicide note." She looked at me as if she could see right through me and said with certainty, "I've known her for more than 20 years. She can be said to be the person in the world who knows me best." "Suicide note." I pretended to be surprised. "This is your handwriting. In junior high school, you were good at imitating handwriting," she said with conviction. She was right. But when did she get this suicide note? I've been with her since I left the suicide note at the police station. No, the class reunion. I sat in the corner the whole time. I didn't join them. Maybe during those 2 hours. From my house to the class reunion. 2 hours is enough for a round trip. Where did you find it? I'm still trying to play dumb. She threw the suicide note in front of me. "Linda, don't pretend in front of me. Isn't it in the drawer behind you?" "You." "Last night." She didn't look at me. She just raised the corner of her lips and said flatly, "Yes. Yes. It's a class reunion." "Yes. How did you know my plan? Or did you come to find Ronald?" At this moment, I seemed to realize one thing. From beginning to end, I have been using a certain software's friend list to track down Ronald's mistress. And I never actually caught Ronald and Jenny in the act. Could it be that I was wrong from the start? And the person in the friend list, Mary, was someone I never suspected and always ignored. "It was you." I asked incredulously. It was me. She answered calmly. I killed Ronald. What the hell is going on? Why did you come to my house last night? And help me kill Ronald? Because he was going to kill you. What? You kept such an important matter from me. I didn't want to involve you. If you knew, you would definitely get involved. You know me. Then Mary took out an envelope from her coat pocket. Inside the envelope were a few sheets of paper. On the paper was a group of conversations on a mobile phone chat page. And one of the parties to the conversation was my husband, Ronald. It contained details of his plan with the other person to kill me. Ronald knew that I would definitely drink at the class reunion. So he planned to drug me after I got home from the class reunion. Let the alcohol and drugs in my body produce lethal substances, so that he could be exonerated. Reading this conversation, I almost laughed. We are a perfect match. We came up with the exact same plan. Luckily, I acted a little earlier than he did. Otherwise, I would be lying in the police morgue right now. Where did this conversation come from? 3 days ago. I received it from a sender with a pseudonym. Son. I don't know who sent it. Why didn't you just tell me? No one knows if it's true. If it's fake, then it's just a prank. But if it's true, and I tell you, I'll have alerted him. How can Ronald admit to killing you? And if he's alerted, he'll change the way he kills you. Then it'll be an enemy in the dark, and us in the light situation. That's when you'll be in real danger. I pondered her words. She continued. So I am planning to come to your house during the reunion. How did you get in? Ronald let me in. Our eyes met. I made up an excuse to see you. But at that time, he was in a dazed state, ready to fall asleep at any time. Then I remembered that incident and knew. You struck first. You put him in the bathtub. I was even a little surprised. Yes. That way, the time he took the drug would be blurred, and the cause of death would be drowning. You even thought of a suicide note. After so many years, your methods have not changed. The sound of the music ended as we looked at each other and smiled. This was a secret we had guarded together for 20 years. Mary and I were in the same class since elementary school, and went to the same middle school, and were as close as sisters. But her biological father passed away before she started elementary school. And her mother remarried, and had a stepfather, who drank every day, and abused her mother, and her, beating them both up. And even, one time when he was drunk, he raped Mary, who was only 13. That night, her mother went crazy, and she also thought about not wanting to live. Luckily, that night I was planning to go to her house to play with her. And I saw her covered in blood, crying and running out. I followed her all the way to the river. Just as the river was about to drown her, I grabbed hold of her, and she told me everything that had happened that night. I didn't know how to comfort her, because I knew that comfort was useless to her at that moment. So we just calmly looked at the starry night sky. I slowly said, then let's make him disappear completely. That night, we sat by the river for a long time that night, with fear in our hearts, and unrest, and indignation. I wanted to rush over there and kill her stepfather, but the fear was eventually drowned out by the darkness. That night, we made a careful plan. We decided to let him die in silence. At that time, sleeping pills could still be bought by the bottle. And because the older members of the family suffered from insomnia, they often kept them at home. Samari and I would each take a few from home every week. The quantity was very small, so no one noticed. In just 1 month, we had saved up a bottle's worth. And during this time, I did something else. I imitated the handwriting. Mary went to school every day, and stole her stepfather's letters from home, and brought them home at night, and put them back exactly as they were. Eventually, I was quite successful. At least at the time, the police didn't suspect anything. He died a violent death, and the case was immediately ruled a suicide. So chose a quiet night, and put a large amount of sleeping pills into the wine he drank every day. That night, The beast died in agony and left this world for good. Mary and her mother's lives finally returned to normal. The next morning, I woke up from my hangover. But I was alone on the sofa. There were still the empty wine bottles on the table that Mary and I had drunk the day before. But she wasn't here. I looked at my phone. It was Monday. I thought she must be on her way to work. So I wanted to send her a message. Be safe on the way. But the next second, Mary's phone rang from under the sofa cushion. I got up and lifted the sofa cushion. It was Mary's phone. I looked at the doorstep again. Mary's shoes were still there. I guessed she had gone to the bathroom. Mary. Mary. There was no answer inside. I went to the bathroom. But there was no one here. Mary. The next moment, I saw. Mary was dead. At the moment, her limbs were tied to my bedroom bed. A large part of her long hair was missing. And there were large patches of blood seeping through her clothes. Her face was pale. I walked in and saw that there was pinpoint hemorrhaging in Mary's conjunctiva. Her face was cyanotic. Her pupils were dilated. The same as when I killed Jenny. Asphyxiation. And the details of the method were clearly the method of the serial killer in Jiangqing. Isn't the murderer Ronald? He's already dead. The only people who know the details are the police. And me. For a moment, I was in a daze. Could it be that I killed Mary while drunk? No, that's impossible. There was something wrong. There was something wrong. Mary and I were both good drinkers. Why did I pass out after only 2 drinks last night? There was something wrong with the wine. I quickly used Mary's phone to call the police. About 10 minutes later, Officer Chen was in charge of the case. And when he first saw Mary's dead body, his expression was even more surprised than mine. But then, I became the prime suspect in his mind. After all, he had told me the details of the crime. I was the only one who knew. And at that moment, I realized that I had overlooked a key issue. The engraving on Jenny's body. Who did it? The person who did the engraving must know the details of this case. And the person who knows the details, I'm afraid, is only the murderer himself. I may have been targeted a long time ago. I was once again taken back to the police station. This time, not as a family member of the victim assisting in the investigation, but as a suspect. I was forcibly taken back. For investigation. I recounted all the traces of my leaving the police station yesterday. After leaving the police station, Mary and I only went home. During that time, Mary went downstairs to buy alcohol. And we never left the house again. We tested the wine you mentioned. There was nothing wrong with it. But the blood test showed traces of a small amount of sleeping pills. But Miss Linda, this does not exonerate you. Officer Chen was as cold as usual. His eyes, like sharp swords, fixed on me. Now, we even have reason to suspect that you are the true murderer of the serial killings in Jiangqing. You know, the modus operandi, and the details. And the victim's hair was found in your house. How? Do you explain all this? Officer Chen spoke at length. And every point he made was one I couldn't answer. But the urgent matter at hand was that I had to prove my innocence, so that I could walk out of here. Or I would be blamed for the deaths of these people for no reason. If I pointed out now that the engraving on Jenny's body was added by the murderer, then I could get away with the crime of serial killer. But at the same time, I would become the real murderer of Jenny's case. 2 had no murderous intent. I had no time to commit the crime. At that time, I was drunk. And sleeping. I know this is very weak. And pale. But I can't think of a suitable reason. At the moment, Officer Chen's lips curled upwards. But Mary's time of death was around midnight today. And you were always in the same room as her. And there were no signs of forced entry. Everything points to you. I tried hard to suppress the anger in my heart. My brain was looking for a way to justify myself. But it seems I don't have. Wait. I have. A watch. I suddenly excitedly blurted out. My watch. Officer Chen's gaze fell on the watch on my left wrist. It can record sleep. It must be able to see what time I fell asleep. Officer Chen's expression seemed to tell me He was a little disappointed. He gestured to the policeman next to him to take off my watch. Sure enough, the watch recorded the time of my sleep last night. From last night to this morning, I was in a state of sleep. Even at the time of Mary's murder, I was in a state of deep sleep. I successfully cleared myself of suspicion. But this means the serial killer in Jiangqing is still at large. But what about the hair in my house? Could it be that Ronald has an accomplice? After I was cleared of suspicion, I returned home again. And this time, I left Mary at the police station. I was the only one going home. As soon as I arrived at the door, I met Jeffrey from across the street. He looked very worn out. His eye sockets were sunken in. It looked like he hadn't slept all night. It had only been a day or two, but a beard about a centimeter long had grown on the sides of his cheeks. My condolences, he said. You too, I replied weakly. Just as I was about to open the door, Jeffrey suggested that if I didn't mind, I could come over to his place for a chat. Perhaps out of sympathy for his loss. I agreed immediately. Walking into his place, the familiar smell from my memories came rushing back, and the scene of Jenny's murder replayed in my mind. At that moment, my gaze fell on the clivia on the balcony. It was the same one that had appeared in Jenny's account. I suddenly remembered the ridiculous slogan, "Love is a meeting of the soul." I walked over to the bookshelf in the living room and picked up a book to flip through. I didn't know what to say. And at that moment, a cell phone suddenly rang. I remembered it was Jenny's. When I sent it, it was this sound. My eyes fell on the source of the sound. The phone was in Jeffrey's hand. Jenny had cheated on me. My mind suddenly snapped awake. It seems Jeffrey knew too. The police found out. Accidental death. All the information about the deceased is checked, he said calmly, without the slightest change in expression. So who is the other party? I pretended to be relaxed and continued the conversation. He took out 2 glasses, just like the ones in my house, and placed them in front of me. I'm not sure, but he said nonchalantly. And then got up to get a bottle of wine. I picked up the glass and looked at it carefully. It was indeed the same as the one Ronald bought back. I put the glass back in place. And then he walked back to the table, opened the bottle, and poured the wine into the glass, and handed me the glass. He was much calmer than I expected, as if he were talking about someone else. I took a sip of the wine and waited for his response. But before he could speak, my phone rang. It was the police. I signaled Jeffrey to go to the balcony to take the call. Linda, we need to confirm one detail with you. Last month, on Thursday night, where was your husband Ronald? I answered almost without thinking. It was our wedding anniversary. He was home that night. What's wrong? Where are you now? A hurried voice came over the phone. I'm at my neighbor's. What's wrong? Officer Chen. Jeffrey's home. Yes. The police now reasonably suspect Ronald's accomplice is likely to be your neighbor, Jeffrey. So you are in danger. Hurry home. We are on our way to your home. Okay. Don't hang up. Now make an excuse. Go out and go home. Then I followed Officer Chen's instructions and turned towards the door, but suddenly felt dizzy, and my limbs grew weak. I felt myself falling down and saw a blurred figure approaching me. It really is you. I lost my balance and fell. But I heard a clear voice. It's you. You killed the person I love most. I woke up again in a hospital ward. I was told that Jeffrey was my husband Ronald's accomplice. The two of them were like 2 peas in a pod, killing women and collecting their hair. He was obsessed with engraving words on human bodies. And Jeffrey had already taken poison to avoid being caught. At that moment, the poison came from the glass containing the wine. I had put it there. Anyway, my suspicion was completely cleared, and Jenny's death was naturally attributed to Jeffrey, including Mary. The police found my house key at his house, so they suspected that he might have been lurking at home that night and used sleeping pills when we weren't paying attention. So the alcohol test was fine. Then he took the opportunity to kill Mary. While I was in a coma. He had another way of disposing of me. He gave me a massive overdose of sleeping pills. So I was rushed to hospital and had my stomach pumped. He wanted me to experience the pain Ronald died with. Because Jeffrey's favorite person in the world wasn't Jenny, but my husband Ronald. I couldn't figure out why Jenny had the serial killer's inscription on her body. I thought it might be that the serial killer happened to visit Jenny's house that night. But I got to her first. But according to the police investigation of the neighborhood, there was no trace of the murderer or any suspicious person. So for me, the real murderer of Jenny, the matter is very clear. The murderer who carved the words was Jenny's husband, Jeffrey. He was the only one who met the conditions for the crime. And it was only after I saw a sentence on the title page of a book on his bookshelf that I was completely sure that the person he loved was Ronald. And the people in Ronald's friends list were Jeffrey. And the sentence on the title page was, "Love is the union of souls, not the confinement of genders." At that moment, it all became clear to me.